It is a game changer for employee engagement in the organization, for people getting aligned for where you're going and how you're going to get there, for people all rowing in the same direction, for the people that just the whole culture itself, that whole quarterly conversation done well is huge.
Welcome to episode number 199 of Better Business, Better Life. It's really hard to believe, but we're almost there, up to 200 episodes. I'm your host, Debra Chantry-Taylor, and just like my guest today, I am passionate about helping entrepreneurs lead their ideal lives by creating better businesses. I'm a certified EOS implementer, an FBA-accredited family business advisor, and a business owner myself with several business interests. I work with established business owners and their leadership teams to help them live their ideal entrepreneurial life using EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Today's guest is a fellow certified EOS implementer. He has taken a US family business from national company to a truly global company, traveling the world, including Australia. He's worked with over 60 businesses through the EOS framework, and he's a certified Kolbe A Consultant. Today, he's going to share how you can use the EOS tools to create a better business and better life. Bill Stratton is a 7635 on the Kolbe A profile, and he's the person who will help visionaries cut through the noise and crazy ideas to have the really tough conversations and deliver real value. So welcome to the show, Bill. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Deborah.
Absolute pleasure. Hey, look, I always enjoy getting my fellow EOS implementers on board because one of the things I loved about EOS is that all of the implementers have got actual experience in running businesses. So we're not some kind of theoretical coach that's never done anything. We've actually been there, done that. We've got the T-shirt. And you've got a really interesting story in terms of how you came across EOS, right?
I do.
Would you like to share some of that with us, Bill?
Sure. So I've worked in family-owned manufacturing businesses for the last 30 plus years, actually until 2014, before I became an EOS implementer. One, we grew from 13 million to 115 million in revenue. And we also went from being a national player in the United States to a global player. And it was a lot of fun. I got to see a lot part of the world, including your part of the world, in Australia and in Southeast Asia. And then in 2014, I was recruited by a family-owned business that manufactures home elevators and wheelchair lifts and dumbwaiters, and they were losing money. And I was asked to turn it around. They actually hired me as president and CEO, and I thought, okay, this is a neat opportunity. Let's do something different. And I got on board, and it actually was worse than even the owners knew. So it was a lot of work. We had to make some difficult decisions, but we did. And we stopped the bleeding and we turned the business around, and it started to make money starting in 2015. And in 2016, we were making progress, but I felt that we were missing something. I didn't know what it was. I just knew we could be better. And at the time, I was in Vistage, which is a peer group of other CEOs that I was working with. And our speaker for one of our monthly sessions, it was on process triage, actually. And at the end of that day, since I was a host, he gave me a copy of the book, Get a Grip, by Gino Wickman and Mike Payton. And I thought, okay, thanks. And then I started reading it. And I read it fast. This was wow, the light bulb went off for me. It's this is what we were missing. And so I called EOS Worldwide, talked to Sean Fain, who was handling warm leads at the time, and she put me in touch with Hank O'Donnell, who was a very well-known EOS implementer. And he came and did the 90-minute meeting for my leadership team and me in July of 2016. And 2 days later, we said to Hank, let's do it. Let's go. My whole team wants to do this. So we had our first focus day in September of 2016. And it was a 2-year journey that was absolutely transformational for the business, starting at the leadership team level. Then as we rolled it out to the rest of the organization, it just changed the whole trajectory of the business. And I remember in the second year, we were still working with Hank, the second year of EOS implementation, we had one major issue. Our sales weren't growing the way they needed to. They should have been growing at a higher rate than housing starts, and we were actually at a slower rate than housing starts. So something was missing. And so that's an issue. One issue we actually IDS 2 weeks in a row in our level 10 meeting. That issue alone. And we came to the conclusion that the issue was not our sales team, but our business model. And that we had to change the business model to something that could help us grow more profitably in the future. And in order to do that, we also had to form a new division to support that, which we did both. We got the owners to agree to it. And so we were positioned in the summer of 2018 to grow. I had a very strong leadership team. We had started getting revenue in this new division supporting the new business model. And I let the owners know that I'm going to leave. I want to do what Hank did. I want to make a difference for other entrepreneurs just the same way that Hank made a difference for my leadership team and me at this manufacturing business in central Pennsylvania. So that's my story. And then in 2018, I went to boot camp. I was in the first Denver boot camp, best boot camp ever. And I've been an EOS implementer ever since for the last 6 years. I've worked with over 40 different business owners and their leadership team, and I've completed over 330 full-day sessions, and I'm enjoying it. I love it.
I love our EOS community. I think we all have a great passion for what we do. And I think that what you just said is really true for me as well. It's like, it does make a difference almost immediately in the business. Is what I find fascinating is that right from the word go, from the focus day, there is a fundamental difference and change in the way the business operates, which is what I think is great about EOS.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then seeing how some of these business owners and their teams have progressed over the years as I've worked with them and the traction they're gaining, and especially some of the ones that not only is it positively impacting their business, but their lives. We do make a big difference on our clients' lives.
I completely agree. Hey, I want to just deep dive into something for a moment there. You said that you IDS'd an issue in that business twice over 2 level 10s. And I think this is one of my things that I do love about EOS is it really gets you laser sharp focused on the things that are most important. But some teams feel like they have to get through all their issues in every single level 10. But in reality, sometimes it can be that one issue that really makes the biggest difference, right?
Yes, that one issue was a game changer for the business. They wouldn't have doubled in size over the last 6 years if we didn't make that decision. They wouldn't have the profitability that they have today if we didn't spend the time on that one major issue. And yes, it took us two, that's the only thing we talked about for 2 straight weeks in our level 10, but it was a game changer for us.
Yeah. And that's the power of that IDS, isn't it? If you're really dealing with the most important issue, even if it takes up the whole meeting or 2 meetings, it's worthwhile doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So you've been a EOS implementer now for 6 years and obviously with a whole number of companies. How has it been switching from being somebody actually running the business to somebody helping other people in the business?
It's been great. It's, it's almost like it magnifies my influence because I'm working with at any one time between 15 and 20 different businesses and their business owners and their leadership teams. So my skill and everything I bring as an EOS implementer just spreads it out as opposed to just working in one business. It magnifies it.
And it helps that you've actually used it in running your own businesses and seen the power of it. Is there a favorite EOS tool that you have? Is there one thing that sort of really stands out for you that you sort of, because you said you read Get a Grip, and I have to say I was the same. I voraciously read that book. It was just, had to get, it was all very, very quickly. And I suppose there's a lot of very simplistic tools in EOS, but is there one that really stands out for you?
For me, it's a quarterly conversation.
Okay.
Which is part of LMA. It when done well, it is a game changer for employee engagement in the organization, for people getting aligned for where you're going and how you're going to get there, for people all rowing in the same direction, for the people that just the whole culture itself, that whole quarterly conversation done well is huge. And unfortunately, not all my clients take it to heart the way they should. But if they do the quarterly conversation, they have the proper discussions, they develop the relationship with their direct reports, and they hold their direct reports accountable, to me, that's the most important tool.
Yeah. And I think for people who maybe aren't completely familiar with EOS, we have lots of 3-letter acronyms, and LMA being one of them. So that stands for Lead and Manage to Hold People Accountable. And the quarterly conversations, I think, is something that was it was a bit of a game changer for me too, because it is actually a conversation. It's not designed to be a performance review. It's actually about having a genuine conversation to understand where they're at, to understand where they feel things could be improved. Tell me a little bit about the true kind of quarterly conversation.
So a really well done quarterly set conversation, the leader, the manager, and the direct report prepare ahead of time. Not anything formal, but just what's working well, what's not working well. How well are you doing on your rocks? How is your behavior as it relates to your core values for the business? How are you doing in your role? What are those, the 5 or so key things in your seat? How well are you doing in those roles and responsibilities that you have? Are there things we could be doing better? Is there things me as your boss that I can help you with? And so I'm looking for feedback as well. If I'm going in there as a manager working with my direct report, I want to have their feedback. And it's a two-way conversation when we have these quarterly conversations. It's back and forth. And it's very healthy. And we do this every 90 days. And we recommend we do it every 90 days. And that also, the other important thing is that you schedule them out 6 months. So you have it on the calendar every six. So you have one 90 days from now, one 180 days from now, and you keep that out there because that sends a huge message to your direct report that they matter. So that's a big part of that. And then by the time, if the business does annual performance reviews, by the time they get to the formal performance review, there should be no surprises.
Yeah. And I love the fact that we do schedule them out in advance because, like you said, I think it's also if you get called into a meeting ad hoc, it feels like there's something wrong. Whereas if you're actually scheduling, then what you're doing is being proactive. You're saying, hey, we want to make sure we're doing the best we possibly can every 90 days.
Yeah, and it also sends a positive message to your direct report that they matter.
Yeah, very true. Okay, and so for people who've never heard of this concept before, who you said that the leader and the manager and the employee obviously prepare for it. Is this done across the whole organization?
Yes, it should be the whole organization.
Yeah. And the power of that means that we've got everybody having conversations about particularly what's working. When we ask about what's working, what's not working, we get people to think about the company as a whole, the department, and then also individually, both the employee and the manager, what's working, what's not working.
That's correct. It should be across the board. And I've come across situations where maybe, especially in manufacturing, where maybe you might have a shift supervisor or production manager have 15 direct reports, and they look at me when we're in session when I'm teaching them LMA, and they like, how can I do 15? And I look at them and say, well, you have a structure problem. Take a look at your accountability chart because you shouldn't have 15 direct reports. How can you give them what they need individually if you've got 15 direct reports? So then I go back to them and I say, maybe you set it up that you have team leads. There's different ways you can do it to get it to the point where everyone's having the quarterly conversations. And oh, by the way, you'll be a much better manager if you've got the time to have these meaningful conversations with direct reports.
It is interesting, isn't it? I know that I've worked with a couple of teams now that have had even the leadership team, 11 people in the leadership team when we first, did the first 90-minute. And you go, how can this possibly be? And, it was actually quite fascinating. One of them was actually, there was a visionary, very, very clear visionary with 11 direct reports at the leadership team level, but no integrator in the business. And as this 11 people were working 70, 80-hour weeks and always running around, always chasing their tail. And it came down to it came down to the fact that they were all there was no filter between the visionary and the leadership team. So when the visionary had an idea, these 11 people would be madly rushing around trying to execute on that idea, and probably all 11 of them working on things simultaneously, not even realizing they're working on things simultaneously. And it was just amazing that whole less is more. Once we got it down to 4 people across the leadership team, plus the integrator, plus the visionary, it was just a game changer.
Oh, yeah, I would imagine it would be.
Yeah. But the same applies at other levels. Like you said, you cannot have 15 people reporting into you and be an effective leader and manager of that.
No, you can't. It's just not possible.
Now, when we spoke before we got onto the podcast, you talked about the fact that EOS brought a whole new level of sort of transparency and ability to have difficult conversations. Can we explore that a wee bit more?
Sure. You mean at the business I was at?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could tell you that I had a leadership team that wasn't afraid to challenge me. I remember one situation, I had a really good production manager, and he came into me one day and goes, Bill, and this gets back to this whole issue we had and why we had the level 10 deep dive for that one issue. Bill, what am I going to make in 2 weeks? And so I was a sales leader as well as a integrator, and I couldn't answer his question. He was telling the truth. And I mean, that was a difficult conversation, but he was not afraid to come in and say, Bill, I need to plan. Where are the orders?
That's great. And so talk me through how you see this playing out when you work with clients. Like, how do they get, why are they suddenly able to have these more effective conversations and not be afraid to challenge?
They build trust as a leadership team. We do teach them, especially on the annual planning sessions, to be, the Lencioni pyramid, the five dysfunctions of a team Lencioni pyramid, or trust is the base. But we emphasize and we encourage it and we call it out that they've got to be open and honest. They've got to be open to the perspectives of the other members of the leadership team in the room, and that you want to listen to understand, not listen to just answer a question. And that if you don't agree, you've got to speak up, because the best decisions are going to come when you're open and honest with each other. If you don't speak up, you're basically maybe agreeing with a less than optimal decision for the business. If you look at Lencioni's pyramid, once you have that trust, the next part is conflict. And it's not conflict personal, it's conflict on the issues. And it's about getting to the best decision for the business. So as these leaders that I work with are getting used to having these difficult conversations, they're actually having much more effective meetings and they're making better decisions. And they're not afraid to have the difficult conversations that they need to have.
Yeah, because they've got that trust amongst them. They know it won't be used against them.
Correct.
Yeah, it is. It's wonderful. You must see it a lot. I see teams who really completely transform in quite a short period of time just by bringing in some very, very simple tools that help them to have those conversations. I'll never forget, I had one team where, you know how we score our level 10 meetings and it's always out of a 10 and, every meeting's perfect before it starts. There was one particular person in this level 10 meeting who kept scoring it at a 6 or a 7 while all the rest of the team was scoring at 8 plus. And so I remember getting on the phone to this person. I said to them, how come you're scoring this meeting at 6 when everybody else is giving it an 8 plus? And she's like, well, you don't understand. You see, the boys, they go off on these tangents and they do this and they do that. I said, well, hold on a second. Are you not in these meetings? She said, yes. I said, so why aren't you actually calling that out? Because it's your responsibility to ensure that you actually get the best from these meetings. And it was kind of like a light bulb moment for her. It's like, oh, I should be doing that. Yes, this is what it's all about. You've got to actually take responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot. And the other area I encourage them is, if someone's saying the rock's on track, and you don't believe so, you question it, you've got to call that out as well. You don't want to wait till 2 weeks before their quarterly to find out the rock's off track, because then you probably can't get it back on track.
Yeah. And there's always kind ways of doing that. You can always say, look, I just don't feel like I have enough information about that. Why don't you let's drop it down to the issues, let's have a discussion around it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that it's good to see people actually wanting the best for the company. Yeah. Okay, so we've got the quarterly conversations. I think level 10 meetings are definitely a game changer. There's something that I think obviously we teach in the focus day, and that's why we see significant results from day one. What other tools do you find really simple but really effective?
I like Kolbe A Index. And the reason for that is that people don't understand, they're all wired differently, and it just helps them work together more effectively. And so I tend to teach Kolbe A when I can, sometimes earlier in the process, because it really helps teams understand how each other are wired, how they actually go about striving and solving problems.
So for those who've never heard of Kolbe, so Kolbe is, my understanding of it is, actually you're certified, you can probably explain it a whole lot better, but it is about the way that people naturally work. And I believe that doesn't actually change over time, like we're fundamentally wired to work in a certain way. So tell me more. Tell me about what that teaches us, how that helps us to understand our team better.
So Kolbe, basically, there's three parts of the mind. The cognitive part of mind, that's about how your intelligence, your education, your experience. The affective part of the mind, that's the part of the mind that it's what you want to do, it's what you value. Assessments such as Myers-Briggs or DISC or PRINT or some of the others, they are really measuring the affective part of the mind, what you value. And then the conative part of the mind, which is what Kolbe A measures, is how you naturally strive when you have to solve a problem or are working on a project. It's where you put your energy. And we're all wired differently. And you're right, it doesn't change over the course of our lives. You can take it when you're 15, 35, 55, 75, and it's not going to vary by more than a point or two.
Okay, and so then by doing the Kolbe A test, they get the results. Then what?
Well, then we look at them. How do you have any gaps as a team? Or do you have too much of one type of energy that might be getting you stuck? Like if you've got a team full of initiating fact finders, they could get caught going down rabbit holes because there's no one on there to say, okay, let's summarize it, let's move on. And so there are some traps. So what I do when I work with teams is I not only work with them and share with them what their individual Kolbes look like, but actually put together team synergy analyses to show them, here's where you're strong, here's where you're missing some methods that you might need depending on the project or the problem you're trying to solve. So it is very good of actually identifying who would best work together on this particular project or this particular issue.
I'm interested. What is your Kolbe profile, Bill?
I'm a 7-6-3-5, which means I am wired as a natural integrator. I'm the one who's going to push back on that visionary with 1,000 ideas. I'm going to want to my 3, so 3 is a counteracting quick start. So as a 3, I'm going to want to say, okay, if this is working, why do we want to change it? Or if the visionary that's coming up with 20 ideas in a week, I'm going to say, let's narrow that down to 3, Mr. Visionary, Ms. Visionary. And let's make some choices from there. Also, the 7-6 means if I'm going to work on a project, my first amount of energy, so I'm a 7 in fact finder, which means I need details. I want facts. So if I'm going to work on a project or solve a problem, I'm going to do some research before I actually do work. That's where my energy goes.
It's interesting. I'm actually a 6-2-9-3, so I'm one of those terrible kind of quick starts.
You're the visionary.
I'm the visionary.
Yeah.
Which means that it does help me relate to my visionaries in my business. But it's interesting because I did actually work as an integrator in quite a large business, about 220 staff. So I actually one of those people who is able to do it, but it's probably not my natural style.
Yeah, it probably was hard. It took a lot of energy.
Yeah, it did for sure. Okay, so in terms of using Kolbe, so Kolbe combined with some of your other profiles like your Myers-Briggs and your DISC, and then obviously having the EOS framework as well, just means you've got a really good understanding of not only who you are, where you're headed, what you're trying to do, but whether your team is the right team to actually do that and who should be working on which parts in the business, right?
That's correct. And you got to make sure you've got, so the Kolbe is actually really helpful because different seats have sometimes need a certain Kolbe. Like if you have a CFO, you probably wouldn't want to be there because you're counteracting follow through and initiating quick start. And if someone is there, they're probably not going to follow rules. You talk about financial management, CFO, you want someone who follows systems and processes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great. So you did your certification in Kolbe. Was that a recent thing, or have you done that for a while now?
For a while, I've had it since 2020.
Okay, great. Yep. And it obviously dovetails quite nicely with the EOS framework and working with teams to understand it. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So in terms of EOS, have you got any sort of I mean, you've got some really great stories already, but have you got some teams who you've really can share a fundamental change? Because I think that it helps all teams in terms of improving the business. But is there any sort of real standout rock star type stories that you could share?
I've got one. That was one of my third client. So I started with them almost 6 years ago. They're a cybersecurity consulting business based in Central. and they've actually tripled the size of the business. They've actually, their visionary, who's a good friend of mine, has really taken the time to make sure he's got the right people in the right seats. So he's actually changed a few people over the years. Early on, he didn't, and they weren't the rock completion wasn't getting done, and they were getting frustrated. But then when he started putting the right people in the right seats, it started to click for him. He knew he sat in the integrator seat for a little while, and he and his team knew that wasn't a good move. And so he actually hired a fractional integrator for 6 months, and then that fractional integrator did a great job, knew EOS inside and out. And then after that, he helped him hire a full-time integrator. And what I can tell you is this guy, he has been able to take family vacations without calling the office for 3 weeks at a time. Last year, or actually early this year, it was in there when they were in the middle of getting a very important compliance for the type of business they're in, because they do a lot of work with the U.S. government. And they were doing a major trade show, and his wife scheduled a vacation, and he just went on the vacation, and everything worked out great. So when you see that happen, it's like we talk about EOS life, right? Doing what you love to do with people whom you love to do it, making a significant difference, being appropriately compensated, and having time for other things in your life, other passions. That's what he's doing. And it's just so nice to see, and so nice to see his team just thriving.
But what's really interesting, what I just took from that with my notes is that, it's often about the right people, isn't it? When you're not getting rocks completed, you've got to take a good hard look and say, do we really have the right people in the right seats? Because that's probably the cause of our lack of rock completion.
Yeah, that was the cause.
Yeah. And it's difficult, isn't it? Because you would have seen this yourself. And I know I had to make some pretty tough calls as well when I was an integrator for the bus company. But sometimes the person is a great person and they've been there for a long time. And it's really hard because we don't want to upset people. But if you continue to keep that person there, they become the rotten apple, don't they?
Yes, they're actually, if they're not, if they know if they're not GWC in the seat, getting it, wanting it, and actually having the capacity to do it well, they know it, and they're going to be frustrated. They can see it. And so the kindest thing we can do is be kind to them. Being nice isn't necessarily being kind. Patrick Lencioni talks about that all the time. And so having that meaningful conversation and maybe help them find another place, a seat. If you don't have a seat where they can shine and you love working with them, you like them, help them find a seat somewhere else in the market where they can thrive. And everyone wins in the long run.
Yeah, that's actually genuinely being kind because they're going to go and they're going to enjoy way more the role that they actually do GWC. What about wrong people? Have you seen in businesses where there are the wrong people that I think the classic is in Get a Grip, right? There was definitely people in there that were the wrong people, but they kept them because they were good at their job.
I had that issue. I actually had it in the manufacturing business where Hank was our facilitator, our EOS implementer. We had one of our core values would be a great team player. And we had a brilliant electrical engineer who designed our control system for the elevators, who knew it inside and out, was great at it. But he was a minus on being a team player. He was picking fights with folks on the manufacturing floor, with our purchasing manager, and it scared the crap out of his boss. His boss was the director of engineering, and it scared the crap out of both of us because he had to go, or he had to change. And Cliff, who was his boss, who's now running the business, worked with him. Actually, it was amazing. He worked with him and said, "You've got to change your behavior." Gave him a copy of one of the books on emotional intelligence, and he wasn't self-aware. And with coaching, he totally changed in 6 months.
Yeah. I think that's the beauty of the people analyzer. We use it a lot with our teams. Whenever you've got a people issue, get the people analyzer out. And the first question you have to ask is it them or is it us? Have we actually been really clear about what the boundaries are for that particular value? Have we been really clear about the behaviors that we expect? And if we aren't clear about that, then maybe they just are not aware of it. Like you said, self-awareness. Maybe they don't realize that's what they're doing. So by being the clearer you can get around your core values, the clearer you can get around the behaviors are acceptable and not acceptable, the more you can work on it. So he actually changed him from being a negative.
Oh yeah, to a plus. It was great. It was amazing. Yes, it was amazing, and yeah, and then his value to the company just went through the roof because now he was self-aware, he was a team player, and he still GWC'd his seat very well.
So the key thing is, though, if you've got somebody who is negative or doesn't GW to their role, you've got to be able to put the time and resources in if you really want to. If you believe they can be changed, there's a huge amount of time and resources that needs to go into that. Is that fair?
That's fair. Yeah. So you have to want to do it. You have to want to help them change. And if they don't, that's where they have to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's one of my favorite tools, People Analyzer. It's really funny. I'm 5 years into my journey now, and I've worked with, I don't know, 30 or 40 businesses through this process. And it's one of the very beginning tools, but it's coming back more and more and more now as we start to work through. Do we have the right people? I love that. People Analyzer for me just takes all the emotion out of it and just makes it a tool that is,
Yeah, I actually use it like if we have a people issue on the issues list, say in one of our quarterly pulsing sessions, I'll write down I'll actually put the people analyzer on the whiteboard, write down the core values, the 4 or 5, whatever they have, and I say, okay, let's grade this person that we're talking about on core values, plus, minus, minus. So we do that, and then I'll put the seat. I'll actually draw their seat on the accountability chart, write in the 5 things that the 5 or so roles that they're responsible for in that seat, and ask for each of those. Do they GWC? Do they GWC each of the roles? And then then it's there. Then you can actually see what the real issue is.
Yeah.
It's not just
I do exactly
the
the
person.
same. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said the whiteboard just it puts it there in black and white color, whatever you want to. But yeah, it's right there. And then they have to say you have to ask the question quite genuinely: is it them? Is it us? Have we done everything we need to get that person to be the best they possibly can be? And then often there's a realization. It's like, yeah, actually, we probably haven't set the boundaries. We probably haven't given them the feedback. Maybe we need to do something about that.
Yes, and then they commit to it, and that's their to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Any other rock star or examples you'd love to share of people where EOS has just fundamentally changed the way their business is run?
Oh wow, I've got a whole bunch of them. I've got one that's it's amazing story. It's a business owner who started the business 20 years ago. They make specialty cabinetry, and he actually built his leadership team it's a small company, about 20 people, but he built up his leadership team from within. And they have actually taken it and loving EOS. It's helped them gain a lot of traction. They're getting a handle on everything, and they're going to graduate with their annual come in January. That they've made so much progress, and it's just so cool to see all the progress they made and how well they work together as a team.
It is. I think that's why we love what we do, right? Because you really do get to see the huge difference it gets to make. And I say, right from the word go, right from that focus day. I tell you what, the thing that made me fall in love with EOS when I first got given the books when they launched into the event center over here was the fact that the proven process starts with the focus day, which is actually about tools that change the business as opposed to the vision and all the, because I worked in the Ice House over here for many years, which is a very, very world famous incubator. And we do lots of strategy days where we get the whole leadership team in, we do the vision building. And of course, they'd all leave the room very rah, rah, yay, we've got visions, we've got mission, we've got values. And of course, they go back into the real world and nothing had changed, so they couldn't actually execute on it. Yes, I love the fact that Focus Day is focused on some really simple, pragmatic tools that will fundamentally change the business.
Yeah, it gives them the tools to actually execute on their vision. So we've got to give them the tools first.
Yeah, which is it turns things on its head because most leadership coaches, most business coaches will go straight into let's do the plan, let's get the strategy, rather than how do we actually change the business? Yeah.
Yeah, and they come back to their office and they say, okay, now what? They don't know how to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So we've talked about a couple of tools that you love. What's your third and final kind of tip for anybody who's considering EOS in their business?
I would say reach out to EOS Worldwide and schedule a 90-minute meeting with an EOS implementer, professional EOS implementer. That's the one I'd say. If nothing else, you're going to get some tools you can take back in your business. Doesn't cost you any money. It just costs you 90 minutes of your time with you and your leadership team.
And I think what's really important, people see that as a sales tool, but it's absolutely genuinely not. I mean, I love the fact that you're coming into that 90-minute meeting, you will get taught about the model, about the tools, how to use them. So even if you choose not to work with an EOS implementer, which we would say is not the best choice, but if that's what they choose to do, they're still going to be able to walk away with those tools they can actually use in the business.
Yes, and we even give them a copy of the book Traction.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Hey, Bill, look, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's always fun to get to know my fellow EOS implementers, especially those who actually know where Australia and New Zealand is. We always laugh a wee bit because when Daniel Davis, who set up the Australian kind of community over here for many, many years, he tried to convince Gino to come over to Australia, and Gino just wasn't having a bar of it. So
Oh,
it's nice to have some people who've actually been over here, worked over here, and even worked close where my parents used to live. So
yeah, that's cool. Yes.
yeah. So look, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Really
This has been
appreciate
great.
it. It has been a lot of fun. Thank you, and we'll look forward to catching up at the next QCE.
Thank you, Deborah. Same as
Oh,
well.
Bill, before I go, people want to get hold of you. What's the best way to get hold of you?
So my phone number is +1 717 495 1429. I'm on LinkedIn, so that's another good place. Or my email address is bill.stratton@eosworldwide.com.
Fantastic. Hey, look, thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you, Deborah.